Welcome, whiskey people, to the very first episode of the Whiskey Talkin Podcast. I am your host, Cody Fredrickson, and I'm eagerly looking forward to taking this whiskey journey with all of you. This podcast is for whiskey lovers, newbies, geeks, connoisseurs, or just anyone wanting to hear some incredible people's stories on their life and how whiskey's involved. My goal is to get to know whiskey, but more importantly, whiskey people. This episode features Shane Merriam of Las Vegas, Nevada, currently working at CraftHaus Brewery. When I decided to finally start this podcast, he's the first person I thought of and knew I needed on the show. I recorded on location from his very own whiskey library, also known as Shane's house. So without further ado, everyone, Shane Merriam.
The Whiskey Talkin Podcast.
All right, welcome everybody to the Whiskey Talkin Podcast. Today we have Shane Merriam. Where are we right now? We are in your whiskey library.
We are in the whiskey library, located right here in sunny Las Vegas.
Right? Undisclosed location, so people don't try.
I think the address is on Facebook.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, it's the security in here is crazy though.
Oh, yeah.
Dogs and lasers and all sorts
Sharks
of things
with laser beams.
Right. So, let's kind of get into it. Today we're going to be talking a couple of your whiskeys from your library. Kind of the theme of the show is get to know whiskey, but get to know whiskey people, you know? So when I first decided to do the podcast, you were one of the first people that came to mind.
Honored and humbled.
Yeah, so, and I'm surrounded, you'll see on the Facebook page or Instagram, the amount of whiskey in your collection is just astounding. So we'll get into how that all happened. So first of all, just let the audience know kind of your upbringing and what led you to Vegas.
Yeah, just born and raised in Montreal on the East Coast, and Canadian hockey fan, and just always wanted to be in the hospitality and restaurant industry. I still got a book report in grade 3 that I was going to design a 50s style diner with the old Chevy Bel Air hanging on it and all that kind of stuff. So always really got into that. And then after going to culinary school for a little bit, I started working in actual restaurants and started to kind of gravitate more towards front of the house and especially the bar. So just got into that, and then travels took me to Toronto, and then took me to Tokyo, where I was running a bar for 9 years there. So that was a crazy experience. If you think that makes Vegas look like a quiet little city, Tokyo really does.
I bet.
It was crazy. And then did a little stint in Singapore and Hong Kong before coming back to Vegas, winding up in Vancouver with a chance meeting with a celebrity chef here in town, and we kind of hit it off. And so he recruited me to come down to Vegas, and yeah, that's where I kind of got introduced to all the other amazing people over in the USBG, and really, sharing knowledge and learning, not just about whiskey, but learn about beers and learn about wines and learn about cocktails and service. And it's just, it's been a great experience. I've been here about just over 3 years now.
Awesome, man. Kind of what position are you in right now, currently?
Right now, you could kind of say I'm the man about town, working with CraftHaus Brewery here in town. So I'm in the tap room doing a few days a week there, talking beer, getting ideas with beer. Our brewers, Steve and Steph, are super talented, so they don't need any help making it. But and the rest of the time with some of our new releases, especially the Silver State, getting out there and chatting up with our local bartenders and showing that we do have really good beer coming out of Vegas, which I think we're getting a little bit of a knock on, especially being close to San Diego and some of the other places. But the way I always say to the people from San Diego is, you're downstream from us.
Right. Awesome. I love it. I love the respect that's coming into Vegas for that craft beer scene. It's a slow climb, but someone has to start it. Someone has to lead the way, and CraftHaus is definitely up there.
It is. I think at the end of the day, it's always going to be maybe a Mick Ultra and a Corona kind of town and everything like that. But the one thing that I've seen is, and that I saw my very first year is, everybody sits down at the bar, and 90% of the time, the first question out of their mouth is either, what's local or what's on tap. So It's a huge opportunity, because beer's booming, not just all over America, but all over the world right now. And beer geeks are just that. They're geeks to it, and they love trying new things that they can't get at home. And so that's a perfect opportunity, especially when you're traveling.
Absolutely. And speaking on that, the rise in craft beer scene, particularly with IPAs, just blowing up, you see the public's palate starting to appreciate bitter, starting to appreciate more flavors, right?
100%.
So that kind of goes along with the whiskey boom.
100%.
A lot of the American whiskeys, obviously rye and bourbon took off, but you see a dramatic increase in Scotches, Irish, and we'll be going over some of those today, and some Asian whiskeys too. So
Yeah, can't make a whiskey without making a beer first.
right, exactly. So kind of what got you into whiskey? You know, your first whiskey. What really was the moment where you're like, shit, this is for me?
I can pinpoint it. It was kind of unfortunate that the entire time that I did spend in Japan, I was never into my whiskey, so I missed out on all that opportunity to visit some of the these famous, well now famous distilleries that they have out there. But it was really once I got to Vancouver and took over an Irish pub, I was tasked with building the whiskey program and building basically just the whole menu and tastings, and obviously focusing on Irish. And so I started getting out there, I started tasting, and I started realizing, okay, it wasn't that, one night back in college with Jack Daniels that ruined it for me for the rest of my life, that everybody's got a tequila story, everybody's got a gin story. So I really started realizing the different flavors and what I was missing out on what I liked, what I didn't like, what I had to learn to like. And then what I did was I went out and I spoke to all my reps and tried to learn as much as possible. So I'd be speaking to my Diageo Reserve reps and going through the Johnny Walker line and this and that. And that's where people really started seeing me, to start getting the love and appreciation for it. And that's where I had a chance private meeting with Michael Nicholson, who was a Diageo master distiller with Kalila, with Lagavulin, with Glenkinchie. I think he was there 27 years or something like that. And so we were just sitting in the office, and he goes, do you have any Glenkinchie downstairs behind the bar, with this great thick Scottish accent, which just made it, that much cooler,
better.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's like, be a lad and go fetch it for us. So I go down to the bar, I get that, I pour us a few, and he whips out this test tube from his breast pocket. It's like, might as well be water.
Why not?
And so he just sits there and he pours it out. And then he's like, try this one. And obviously it wasn't water. It was some White Dog straight off the still. And then now try this. He goes, these are the exact two liquids. And it just, my mind exploded. I had 1,000 questions. Like, how do you know? How do you know? And he just looked at me and he's like, this is why I like you.
Yeah.
Because you're always asking an interesting question. And then, from there, it just really took off. I just, couldn't get enough, couldn't learn enough, couldn't get out there and see what was going out there. And, not only Ireland and Scotland, but, what's going on all over the world and everything like that. So it was really that moment where he tried me on the distillate and then tried me on a 12-year-old, and it was the exact same liquid. And you're just like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, so it kind of sparked that interest.
So
first whiskey when you were growing up that you remember, good or bad, just the most memorable growing up?
Oh, definitely growing up was bad. It was just bad nights with, with whiskey cokes.
Yeah. For me, it was, I must have been maybe 12 or 13, but my friend Joe, his dad had Johnny Walker Black, so we stole it, we drank some, and then we filled it back up with water. No,
with water.
We weren't smart. We weren't that smart. So that's my first intro to that. Bourbon, it was, I think, probably Old Granddad early on. So, and it's still something I drink all the time. So
we didn't do that. Yeah, growing up in Canada, especially. I mean, there was a lot of 7.7s, a lot of Seagrams, a lot of CC and ginger. There was a lot of that, and it was one of those things. I never really associated it with whiskey. It was just it's rye, it's Crown. It
is what it is.
It just was never one of those things. But looking back at it, it's like, actually, maybe I did drink a lot more than I realized I did.
Awesome. So with that, I know there was a lot in managing that bar, but what was the first whiskey? Was that the one where you're like, this is a new start to how I think about this?
That was definitely the one that lit the fire and sparked the interest and made me want to learn about about the wood and where it's coming in from and the mash bills and just everything like that. But it was really just getting to be very close friends with my Jameson's ambassador at the time, like that. And he started getting into me, especially with being an Irish pub, getting into the Irish whiskey. And I mean, Irish whiskey is for breakfast. It's just any time of day, the nicest, easiest. It's really the intro. When I get other people come up and they're not into, or they say they don't like whiskey or that, I'll start them with some Irish and get in there and get those nice banana and those floral notes and everything and that pot still smoothness and everything like that. And then just kind of build up. Just like, if somebody comes into the brewery, you're not going to, they're a Coors Light drinker or something. I'm not going to start them with a double IPA. That's just
man.
asking for it.
Would you say one of the most underrated whiskey categories?
Oh, incredibly.
Yeah.
Which is fine with me. If it keeps the price point down compared to
Sure.
some of the other ones, absolutely more for us. And
Yeah.
I mean,
But the growth in that category with the new distilleries, and I mean, it's only a matter of time.
There
it might
was-
not take off to the levels that.
there was 10 years ago, there was 4 distilleries in Ireland, and now there's one in every single county.
Yeah,
and I
that's
mean,
awesome.
it's grown up worldwide. The category, it was almost, and then just learning the history, how it was almost completely squashed by Prohibition. Like, these were other cool things that I super got into it when John Cashman from Cooley's, when he came into Vancouver, and I got to meet him for the first time, and telling me the story about Tyrconnell and looking at these old black and white photographs pre-Prohibition of Yankee Stadium and seeing Tyrconnell plastered all over the place.
Where'd
Like,
that go?
This is unbelievable.
Yeah. So awesome, man. With that, let's get into our first whiskey that you provided from the library. So,
Leire.
Leire.
How I believe it's pronounced. This was actually Jim Murray's Irish Whiskey of the Year in 2012, I believe. And this was a funny one. So what I like to do, especially for my library, is, anybody can win the lottery and go to Total Wine and buy every shelf. I like to get stuff that's kind of really rare, very unique. There's a lot of duty-free exclusives out there and stuff like that.
Sure.
And this is a bottle that was made by the Cooley's Distillery specifically for Sainsbury grocery stores. So that would be kind of like if you go to Costco and you see Kirkland. Kirkland has their own product made specifically for Costco, and then all of a sudden in a blind tasting, it's getting Whiskey of the Year. So
It's awesome,
it was super cool. So I had a friend that was over working in London for the London Games, the Olympics in 2012, and I was like, hey, bro, next time you go to buy some hot dogs at the grocery store, you mind picking me up a bottle of this? He's like, done.
Perfect. That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's definitely a one you're not going to see anywhere else, at least here, which is cool. A little history that I found. Cooley Distillery, 1987, was converted from a potato alcohol plant by John Teeling. So that's a little nugget of just showing you, you put in 2 column stills and then pot stills later, and it was a slow build. This is Beam, right? Beam Suntory owns this brand.
Did they? Yes, they did. Yes, we were discussing that actually at
2000.
Tales.
2012. They bought it for $95 million.
Yeah.
So that's a good little chunk of change. They have some money to throw around.
I think that's a bargain.
Yeah, yeah, probably is, man.
I think that's a bargain.
So another thing is most Cooley whiskeys are distilled twice, but Irish.
Yeah,
3 times is probably
3-time pot still.
So let's get into it. Ex-bourbon cask, I believe.
It is.
So
it is 8-year, which is kind of, you don't often see on Irish whiskey age statements. And I think specifically because this was a complete one-off.
Sure.
Because they did it once, they bottled it, they had no idea they were going to get Whiskey of the Year, and they're probably regretting it.
You know what? That's happened a couple times. So Jim Murray, he seems to light the fire under some spirit. So let's cheers. First cheers on the show. Hold on. Let's make it a good one.
Ooh,
hear that?
that's
Nice.
Right.
Let's take a little
The
sip.
real Glencairn glasses. It just screams Ireland. I mean, it's pot still. You get a little bit of that grain. Not nearly as much of those banana esters that you get with some of the other ones.
Sure.
But and you could taste that it's a little bit more in a 3 or 4 year. You can certainly taste that coming out of the wood.
There's some depth for sure. I don't know. The first thing I got right off the bat was a lot of honey.
Yep.
But man, really delicious. It's such a cool category, man, that I think more people are going to be getting into, especially whiskey geeks know about it. They're getting there. This is coming in at what, 40%?
That was,
Yeah.
Which again, you don't see very many overproofed Irish. But there are some cask strengths out there that do whoop you in there, and then
Sure.
Then once you start getting into the poaching and stuff like that, you're off to the races.
Awesome. Cool, man. This is thank you so much for sharing this one.
This is like I said, whiskey's made to share. It's sure it is.
That's what I like about the whiskey library.
Yeah,
they're open bottles.
It is a collection, but everything's absolutely open.
Sure.
So I mean, it's there to talk about. And there, I think I had a friend of mine who was an accountant who came and did the math, and he said I would have to have a double a day until I was about 96 to finish it.
Nice. Well, challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted.
How many bottles are in the collection?
At last count, I think at about 240. Now
That's it?
Maybe about
Just kidding.
maybe about 10 of those are, some half bottles or something like that.
Sure,
but,
sure.
Yeah, it's growing faster than I'm drinking it.
Yeah. Well, it's a good problem to have.
It's definitely a good problem to have.
What's the when did you start really like collecting?
It was probably during my time in Vancouver. It started out with going out and buying some rare stuff, and then it turned into doing a lot of travel. Every time I'd be at the airport and seeing specific bottles that I didn't see. The way the liquor industry in Canada is, it's really designated by province-wide stores, province to province, and so you can find some really interesting stuff in Calgary that you can't necessarily get in Toronto. You can pick up a bottle in Montreal that you wouldn't be able to get in Vancouver. I don't think a lot of people, especially in the U.S., know that the LCBO, the Liquor Control Board in Ontario, where Toronto's located, is the largest purchaser of liquor and probably the most powerful distributor in the world, because they buy that much, because it's for the entire all of the province of Ontario, which Toronto's the fourth largest city in North America, and so it's really interesting because you see a lot of allotments of certain things in certain markets that you won't see anything else. You can't go into a grocery store and have it, $30 cheaper than Lee's or something like that. They're all province-wide run liquor stores, and it's the same price whether you're in a city of 4 million or you're in a city of 40. It's the exact same price across the board. And so
pros and cons, though, because there's a lot of stuff you can't get, and it's harder to get into the country.
Absolutely, and the taxation's ridiculous. Yeah. But then on the other hand, I get to see some stuff like, when I was talking with E.T. from Jack Daniels, like, tell me about this bottle of White Rabbit Saloon I picked up. And he's like, how did you get that? And then talking to the Highland Park rep, like, I got a Highland Park 10 blue label. He's like, where did you get that? So when you're meeting some of the people that work for the distilleries and, global brand ambassadors, and they have no idea where you got the stuff, it's kind of like, oh, I guess I got a gem here.
yeah. It's kind of falls in the cracks. What are your most prized bottles that you got back there? I'll ask the follow-up question in a second, which is a little more specific.
That's a tough one. There's that bottle that I think the only one that hasn't been cracked yet is that bottle of Ballantine's 12 that I got gifted to me, and I had to go back in history on Google to find out that it was probably distilled in the 50s and bottled in the 60s.
Wow. So
that's kind of a cool one. Since I haven't tasted it yet, I don't know.
Maybe a future episode.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
if any listeners out there have some current vintage of the Ballantine's 12, let us know. You're more than welcome to come and split it with us. I got a lot of Japanese exclusive ones. I got a bottle I picked up at a 7-Eleven in Buenos Aires for $7 of Argentine whiskey, and I've blind tasted it on many experts, and they couldn't place their finger on it and blow it away. I got some bottles I picked up in New Zealand and Australia. It's really just the stuff that you can't see or you can't find anything else. I've got you've always got your go-tos. Anything that Richard Patterson has touched is just absolutely delicious. David Stewart with the Balvenie,
one of the best in the game, man.
Just so good.
If you ever get a chance, I'll rephrase that. Make it a point to hear him talk about whiskey. It's a game changer.
It is.
Of not only is it entertaining, but the passion that comes out of that guy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ruin his presentation, but Richard Patterson, get after him and check it out.
Oh, most definitely.
I've had the pleasure on 2 occasions of seeing him talk about Dalmore, and it was absolutely crazy. So kind of follow-up question, you kind of already almost answered it, but there's a fire in your nice whiskey library, unfortunately. I'm sorry. You can grab one bottle. What is it?
Ooh. It might be just the first one I get, really.
Really? Yeah, there you go. I like it. You know what I like about you, what I've always respected about you, is that you mentioned it's not the most expensive in your category. That's your favorite.
Absolutely not.
I think a lot of new people into the whiskey category, too, I've seen, get so hung up on not only age statements, but money.
Single malt.
Or just single malt's the best, which is, we can get into that, but absolutely madness when it comes to that. But, but you see that a lot. This was the most expensive. Cool. Like some of my favorite whiskeys, Old Grandad 114. Don't go out and buy it because you're going to raise the price, but I think it's still $25.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, for bourbon, like, or Rittenhouse Rye, you know what I mean? It doesn't have
$22 for Buffalo Trace. Like,
Buffalo
are you
Trace
kidding me?
Staples.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I dig it. I dig that there's more emotional attachment to the bottles than it's just like your first response wasn't, well, I got a $2,000 bottle. That's not what we want to hear. So, I mean, that's a big reason why I picked you to talk, because I knew it would be a little more in depth than just your most expensive bottle.
It's a lot of fun. I mean, I got quite a few bottles up there that I've bottled myself, at Jameson's, at the Bow Street in Ireland, with Dan Garrison and Donis and Sammy and Rev and everybody down in Texas. And I mean, that's an experience.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little later. I can't wait to talk about that. But just one more question about the collection. What do you think the most underrated bottle in your collection is?
Oh, that's a good question. Underrated.
Where if someone comes over and you're like, this is gonna totally change their mind on what whiskey can be.
I think it's one of the ones we're gonna try a little bit later that you don't see a lot of, at least in Vegas, and that's the BenRiach. I think.
I can't wait. I've had it. I tried this in the parking lot of your last.
Because we're classy like that.
You know what? It's whiskey anywhere, man. And I still remember it, how good it was. So that goes to show, but that's whiskey too.
Yep.
You'll remember the place you first tried it.
Yep.
When you have that perfect glass.
Yep.
It doesn't matter where you're at, man.
Given to you by I want to say that the ambassador's name was Stuart. And he showed up to talk to me in a full-on kilt. And I was like, I've got all the time in the world for you right now, my friend.
You talk, I'll listen.
Yeah.
You got the kilt on.
Exactly.
It's like one of those conversation circles where you got the ball, so you get to talk. You got the kilt, you're talking. So
exactly.
So one more, just because we're on underrated. What's the most overrated bottle in your collection? The shelf turd that you wish you didn't buy, but you can't get rid of it.
Oh.
They have to be up there. And not disrespecting the whiskey, but one where you're like, you know what? Maybe this wasn't worth the experience.
You're throwing me for a loop right now. I'm trying to steer back right there. There's a lot out there.
If nothing comes to mind, that's cool.
Yeah, nothing's really coming to mind off the top.
Which is a good problem to have.
Because there's a reason for everything. There's some good and some bad, and there's
Perfect
a time and
answer.
place for everything. And it's all mood depending. So it's certainly nothing to do with money. Because
sure.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Let me think about that one.
All right, good. Think overrated.
Yeah.
But, and it's not throwing a whiskey under the bus, but maybe you can say, this has got so much praise, but I like this equally as much, or...
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ones out there that I don't have in my collection. I would never spend money on a bottle of Pappy. I mean, that's just...
Never heard of it.
First time I went in there, don't bother.
Yeah, never heard of it.
Don't bother.
It'll come up on the show, I'm sure, at some point, but... It has its place, but So when you say overrated whiskey, obviously that's the first that's going to come to mind. But
there's nothing wrong with it. But I mean, when I tasted it, I didn't see unicorns with rainbows coming out of their ass.
Yeah, and that bar is set so high.
That's happened with some of these other ones.
Sure, but that's a cool thing that I think whiskey education is important, man, because there's truth in the glass, there's history in the glass, and it doesn't necessarily mean the price tag or. Overrated doesn't, and worth is such a personal thing and subjective that, when I was behind the bar and, we had some Van Winkle, some of the marks, someone would say, is it worth it? I said, well, worth to me is very different than you.
Absolutely.
So I got you. I mean, when you say overrated, that
when I look in there, just talk about that. I think
if someone gave you a bottle, though.
Johnny Blue. I think I got a bottle of Johnny Blue over there, and it's not even in my top 5 of Johnny Walker expressions.
Sure.
The old gold label, the Johnny Green 15.
Johnny Green.
Oh, that was one of my first mind-blowing moments, the one I had that one. Nothing wrong with blue, but I'd rather have 2 bottles of gold than a bottle of blue.
I got you. Cool. Yeah. Well, let's kind of segue to the next whiskey. We have the Yamazaki single malt the Distiller's Reserve.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So this was one that I got gifted or prized for one of the last UBBC competitions at District 1 using Suntory Toki. So I was kind of super glad to get this one because, again, this is a UK market exclusive. So, I'm not sure how they got it in or what, but... Again, I love having these little kind of gems and everything that you just can't go out and grab, anywhere like that. So that they're always fun. And, Yamazaki really got put on the map in the last 5 years with what they're doing. Well, in fact, all Japanese whiskeys.
Mm-hmm. This kind of led the way for prestige.
Yeah. They don't do anything half-assed in there. It's either it's a very black and white culture. It's either all in or not at all, and
perfect or nothing.
Every step of the way. Yeah. So that was one of my huge regrets was out of all the time I spent in Japan, I never got to go out there. I mean, I went to some breweries and sake breweries and stuff like that, but I never got into it. Never got a chance to go in there. And now looking at all these bars, these whiskey bars that I could have gone to and didn't, or if I did,
there's time.
Yeah, I had a pint of Asahi instead of something unique. So
yeah. So little history on this one. First released in 2014. I read single malt, obviously Bordeaux wine casks, sherry casks, but also this is the really cool thing is Mizunara oak. Right?
Always,
yeah, always have that Japanese oak.
Always. I mean, I don't know with the acquisition of Beam, if they're going to be getting any trade and getting any of that Mizunara outside of the country. I certainly hope not, because that's one of those things that makes it extremely unique. I'd prefer if somebody brought the juice from Beam over and aged it in the rick houses in Japan as opposed to bringing a barrel over there.
Yeah, no.
And keep that, because there's certain things I think, as much as there's loads of people doing some really, really cool experiments and everything like that, I do love that some people are just staying, and this is what we do. And we do it the old school way, and this is how my dad taught me, and this is how his granddad taught him, and all that. And, a lot of people don't even know that some of the Japanese whiskey market it's because of a woman. Yeah. It's not some, bunch of old men in suits or something like that. It's, it's a woman that, had a Japanese student go over to learn it, fall in love, come back to Scotland, and then just keeping the good stuff.
Emulate and perfect.
Yeah, that country's 90% mountains. They've got some of the best, spring water in some of the best areas to sit there and age whiskey and everything. So, why not?
Why not?
And they like to drink over there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners that don't know too much about Mizunara oak, just a little rundown. Started being used around World War II because the imports of European and American oak obviously weren't available or coming in. Higher moisture content, extremely hard to work with because the tree doesn't grow straight. It grows all over the place. Yep. Has to be at least 200 years old in order to be made into a cask alone. More porous and more prone to leaking. Incredibly intense oak flavor. Barrel cost is also around $5,000-ish if you can even find it.
Which is nothing to them.
Right, but that's to say, like, you're over here and you're like, oh, I want to try some Japanese oak. No, you don't, because if you can find it, you're, an American oak barrel is what, $500?
They're 500 pounds full. Were they 500? I thought they were a little bit less than that. They're usually selling for about 1 to 150 used. So I think they were about
350.
Brown Foreman. I think they said they're about 200 new off the line, and then they
for them
lost.
But they also have a their own cooperage.
Yeah. Well.
But, like, for me to buy a brand new full-sized American oak barrel, I think it's like $350 to $500 depending on where you source. French barrel, $1,000 to $3,000, whatever. So that just gives you a little bit of the idea. There's not much in here, obviously, because it's so expensive, but it's definitely prominent. So let's get into it, man.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting culture over there. I mean, when you go to baseball games, you're getting people walking up and down with mini kegs on their backs serving beers, and then you've got the next girl that has almost like those cigarette boxes on suspenders going down with bottles full of whiskey and soda waters, and it's like, you're drinking a whiskey soda at a ball game? This is amazing.
Love it. I love it. Wow. Yeah, you can't go wrong there, man.
Same ingredients. How different does that taste?
Yeah, drastically. So much, like, it's just so much fruit for me. But
this is that, a lot of heather.
Yeah.
Getting in this one.
For me, Japanese whiskey just hits it with balance, man. Finish, acidity. It's always, for me, just when I first taste it, I'm like, fuck, man, the balance is on point. Just that, but that goes to, that art of the blend and the art of, perfecting the craft.
For sure. It's you can hit somebody over the face with vanilla and caramels, but it's when you delve into seeing what all is different out there. And I mean, when you're sitting there thinking that you're drinking this in a bamboo forest right outside of there, with the nice little wind and trickling of water going on, it's it's a more of a spiritual experience than anything else, I think.
Absolutely. And it's just, there's so much to be said about, you can throw, a white dog in a barrel, but to get that balance of oak, the fruitiness, those spices, it's just, obviously they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Oh, it'll get you drunk, but would you rather enjoy it?
Right. This is one where I don't think it's overrated. It got so much hype, but I think it lives up. Price, okay, that goes back to worth. But I think as far as being a solid, amazing whiskey,
this one, it was the 15-year-old sherry that got that whiskey of the year for the first time. That was in 2015, I think it was. But there's definitely loads of different expressions that they're doing and stuff like that. So they know what they're doing. Them and Hibiki, and it's unbelievable. There's probably 20, I think, bottles of Japanese whiskey, maybe 30 that are available here. Mm-hmm. When you go to anywhere, you walk into a 7-Eleven, a Family Mart, any one of those, there's probably 30 different ones on the wall there that you've never even heard of, priced anywhere from super affordable in a plastic ball all the way up. So they probably export 4%, maybe 3% of the stuff. So when you go over there and see some of the stuff that's available, that's when you really start getting
scope
going and everything. I mean, I had whenever I've got friends coming over to visit, it's like, please just go grab something for me, and they'll spend $20-$30 on something, and you're just like, never heard of it, never seen of it, let me look it up, and wow.
That's awesome. That's so killer, man. I love it. Getting back into some questions for you. What's your perfect day off whiskey?
Perfect day off whiskey. It'll completely depend on time of day. I mean, Irish is always what's for breakfast. Yeah, you can get anything.
It's a little colder, in Vegas right now.
I'd be getting into some Highland stuff, like I said. Anything from the Dalmore, anything from the Balvenie, you can't go wrong with that. Highland Park is another one.
What's your favorite Dalmore expression?
Cigar malt.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I think cigar malt is.
I love it.
Is worth the price. I mean,
so
it's
good.
The 12 is fantastic. I've got a bottle of Valor up there that was quite funny when I brought that to the Richard Patterson tasting. He's like, "Really? You're gonna bring some of my own whiskey that I don't have to my tasting?"
Yeah, that's awesome. I know. I remember that. I remember it. Yeah, man. So, everyday value whiskey. How about this? This is a good one. Golf whiskey.
Golf whiskey. Well, I was out playing with Nate Green, and he had a bottle of the Glenmorangie, and there's nothing wrong with that.
The new expression, yeah.
Yeah. Something a little bit lighter.
Yep.
Definitely getting into the Highlands and stuff like that. I wouldn't get into any of the Islas or anything like that. I'll go see a movie and bring a little flask of Buffalo Trace, and nothing wrong with that. Sitting in a dark theater, being that creep over the side.
I love it. So, okay, this is another good one. Hockey whiskey.
Hockey whiskey. Well, we could probably talk about that one last.
Yeah, getting there.
We're getting there. That's right. That'll probably be a good one. That's the only one I could think of right now on the market. Yeah,
I brought up some things that are close to the heart, though. Right, a little bit of golf, a little bit of hockey.
Absolutely. Yeah, golf is usually for beer, but maybe a little bit of whiskey after. I'm still looking for that elusive hole-in-one, so
nice.
Maybe that's where I'll pull it out. But
see,
yeah,
you just need the right whiskey.
Yeah, you get something nice and grassy. I mean, there's certain whiskeys out there that you wouldn't mind getting a big old cup of that and hopping on the mower like Forrest Gump and just rolling around all day long, cutting grass, smelling
nice
green.
highball on.
Yeah,
nothing
something
wrong
like
with that. Man.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I want to do too much whiskey on the course though. I got my own issues with my game.
yeah. Kind of throw you off a bit.
Yeah,
kind of getting into the theater. Favorite food pairings with whiskey. I know it can go all over the place, but what would you pair with a buttered popcorn in a theater?
Definitely Irish.
Yeah, man.
I would totally go over Irish. I had the privilege of being at one of the Glenlivet's whiskey events in Vancouver at a steakhouse, and it was just whiskey with every single course. And I had never just had straight whiskey with a steak before, and I was blown away. I mean, obviously with chocolates and desserts and stuff like that, it goes well, but I was like, this is really, really cool. And I believe the main course with the steak was the Glenlivet 15, and that's probably one of my favorite expressions by them as well. You can start getting a little bit older into the 18s and stuff like that. For a lot of Scotch anyway, 15 seems to be just the perfect year, right? That pinnacle of the arc where it's going to either start to deteriorate or it's going to turn into something really fantastic.
I dig it, man. All right, let's get on to the next one. This one is super, super special. If you want to go ahead and introduce it.
Yeah, this one I got introduced to by Stuart, who was the global brand ambassador for the BenRiach, if that's how we pronounce it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, this one it's a 12-year-old sherry cask, but it's the first time I'd ever seen a Scotch that was not finished in sherry. It was completely matured for 12 years in sherry, and I wish you could be here to smell it and see the color. It's almost a bright pink. This was just, I saw rainbows and unicorns when I had this for the first time.
We'll definitely put it up on all my social media just to let you kind of get a sense of it. So, I mean, it said MSRP for this is around 50. It's obviously a Speyside expression owned by Brown Forman.
Yep.
Yeah.
They are now. The Ben in the name stands for the mountain that the water source comes from. So, I mean, just hearing those little bits of trivia and knowledge that he gives you and everything like that. So it is a mountain that serves as a water source for more than one distillery. But these guys, they were shut down. They were mothballed in the early 2000s. They were previously owned by Canadian Seagrams.
Yep.
They've had
who was Pernod Ricard at the time.
And then Pernod, they've had some really great expressions, but this one with the sherry is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, so they got a little bit of history on it. John Duff, 1898. It was only operational for 2 years and then shut down for 65 years. Mm-hmm. So that's, I mean, Longmore, sister distillery right next door for that time, used their malt off their malting floor, which is awesome. Opened again in 65 to produce contracted whiskey.
Yep.
So very common.
Very common. You wouldn't even know they're there. Yeah,
exactly. 2001, Seagram's bought them. 2004, they became independent. Billy Walker, Scotch legend.
Yeah.
And then Brown Forman bought in 2016. So this is Oloroso and PX.
Yes.
Cask.
Yes.
Yeah?
Two. Yes. Both two sherries. I'm not sure which one was longer than the other, but
sure.
Oh man.
But yeah, 2001 gold best in class. 2015 silver. So it's got the medals, right out the gate.
And it's still, you rarely see it. I think D1 has a couple bottles, not this one, but a couple. But
District 1 in Las Vegas for you listening all over. Check it out. You won't be disappointed there. But obviously non-chill filtered too.
Yeah,
which is just huge.
It's super sexy.
Huge, right?
Super sexy.
Let's get into it.
So we could try it. Don't have that all. What I do have is these little geeky things. I don't know if you've seen there, but
go ahead
the
and explain.
source. Yeah, so I got these as a present once for Christmas, and it's this company that I thought was absolutely brilliant because you can add some spring water or any water that you want. I wouldn't recommend tap into your whiskeys, but this company gets water straight from different sources in different areas. So they've got Isla water, they've got Speyside water, they've got Highland water, and I just thought, this is so cool. Let's get water from the source that we're making it with. Why the hell not?
That's taking like whiskey geek to it. I mean, that's like, listen, like
just throwing a few drops in. You're not going to sit there and, drink, a quart of it.
I dig it, but I love that you have it. So let's get into this one. Cheers.
Fun.
Wow. Oh, just on the nose. It's insane.
It's so good. Yeah, and the fact that the with a bright red label on there really brings out the color.
Yeah.
What's going on? I mean, this might be one of the sweetest expressions of a Scotch that I've ever had. Just money.
Oh man, like the thing I remember when I first tasted it, obviously brought me right back, is the creaminess of this whiskey. It's just the mouthfeel of this is unreal. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have not ever put in a cube of ice in this one. I'd be really curious to see
how it develops.
How that would go in there with some ice. I mean, you can see just by a little bit of water I had in there, it's adding a little bit of that cloudiness from the non-chill filter. But
absolutely.
Oh man, yeah. Thank you, Spain. That's all I'll say. Thank you, Spain.
You know what? Absolutely delicious. So this is definitely, there's a lot of fun expressions that you got here, obviously with all the bottles, but this is one where I'm still thankful you introduced me to it. So
it was, again, I think it was one of those ones that I lucked out with in the Vancouver market. I think we probably got the entire allotment, and I tasted it there, picked up a bottle, went down to the store the next day, bought the other 6, and I think there were last 6 in the city, and it was like, who cares? This isn't going to spoil it. I'm going to love it forever. Perfect. It's and super reasonable, again, because people just don't know about it. Yeah. It's if you're sitting in there, you may not have heard about this this distillery before, so a lot of people might not want to get over that $70, $80, $90 price point when they're getting purchasing a product that they've never heard of or seen before. That's why going out to all these tastings that we do and whiskey festivals and everything like that, to really try in there and see what you like, see what you dislike. It's it's just super fun.
Yeah, man. So once again, just for those listening, as we're kind of blasting through these whiskeys, all the information about all the whiskeys we tasted will be in a recap. Website, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. But this was the BenRiach. Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah. Sounds good to me, right? Let's get into so working with beer, obviously. I mean, that's I don't know which you're more passionate about. I can't.
Depends on the time of day.
Exactly.
Depends on the time of day. There's a time and place for everything. It's
like your kids, right?
Yeah.
So it'd be like, how are you going to pick?
I'm sure there's some out there.
Don't come calling, though.
Don't come calling.
He's too busy.
Why do you think I move every 4 years?
Perfect. There's other little whiskey libraries out there somewhere.
Yeah, little redheads running around Asia.
Oh, man. Well, there's that. So getting back to the point, although, listen, I could talk about that too. So, but with your work with beer, how's your whiskey and beer knowledge helped you with your palate into cocktail competitions? Because I know you've won a few. Not a little humble brag, but you've
tremendously.
Won a few.
Yeah, no, tremendously. It's just getting out there. It's trying to pick up not just wine, especially as well. Trying to pick up subtle nuances and flavors, and kind of my philosophy behind it is pick one and explode it. Just try to get that one flavor that you're trying to concentrate on in the base spirit and really accentuate it. Like if you can feed those almond notes, some steroids, and make that really shine out. If you want to make it vanilla, then let's do that. I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people are doing is they're trying to reinvent the wheel, and I don't know why.
It's
classics are there for a reason. Pick a flavor in it,
slight tweak.
Put that volume up a little bit like that. It's it's kind of what some of the WWE characters, what they say about themselves. They go, it's my own personality, but turned up to 11.
Sure.
So that's what it is. So I like to find one little thing that I'm trying to focus on in that, and turning it up to 11. I think when you're making a super balanced cocktail, you're not trying to make a great example is that 20 vegetable fried rice at Chino Poblano. Like, no, that's great for fried rice, not good for a cocktail.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, it's, not getting too much into the bartending aspect, but that's definitely happens with craft bartenders. You kind of go overboard and then you start to scale it back. And you're like, what's most important? One of my biggest pet peeves, it happens in whiskey tastings too. Someone will say, it's all very, personal to what you pull out. But, a menu will say this cocktail has, this, and this ingredient. Like they list it and I can't taste that ingredient. Now I'm annoyed. Like, think, if you're listing ingredient, let it shine. You know what I mean? So I think the greatest example, really good advice for cocktails, this is a whiskey podcast, but it's going to blend into cocktails because my background's in bartending, and you've obviously had bartending experience and managerial roles. So it was Natalia Mendoza, owner of Herbs and Rye, said, keep it simple, but have a little bit of controversy. That's it. You just need that little bit to go, So anyway, but that's in whiskey too. You're seeing a lot of experimental stuff come out where it's just so crazy, and that's fun. But ultimately, the classics are the classics because they're fucking great.
100%. And I mean, when something is in, where you're looking at some of these fantastic whiskeys, and if something is in a barrel for 12 years and you're gonna cover it up with something artificial or flavor, like what was the point of even doing that? These things are so great by themselves. Like I'm still waiting one day for at a UBBC or something else for somebody to just pour the spirit over an ice cube and wink.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, I'll get 0 on originality, but I know I'm getting 10 on flavor.
You know what? Yeah, just maybe tell a little story and whisper it over the glass. Just let it speak. That's kind of, for those that are listening too, you know, the podcast is Whiskey Talkin Podcast. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, like, you know, if this gets out of hand, it's a Whiskey Talkin. But it's also, I have such respect for the craft that I wanted the whiskey to speak. There's so much history, so much... Just let it tell the story.
Exactly.
And kind of be an interpreter if you can.
It's the same with it's any barrel-aged spirit, really. I mean, fine, whether you're doing vodka or you're doing straight still and gin and stuff like that, they've got their different kind of things going on. But, I mean, the wood is just so important when it comes to whiskey. And then especially when you're doing finishes where you're going from an ex-bourbon barrel to a sherry or you're going to a port finish. And it's like, I want to taste those port notes. Maybe I'll focus on the raisin or date flavor in there and try to accentuate it, something like that.
What did Paul Picault say is 70-something%?
Yeah.
Debatable, but, you know, I've heard 65 to 80% of the flavor of whiskey comes from the wood. How would you do?
What was the formula again? It was...
I have it written down as perfect.
Volume times this plus the secret ingredient, which is magic. And I was like,
the secret element was
surface area times volume plus time, and
plus
then,
magic.
And
you can't. There's that X that you can't define with.
I mean,
whiskey.
that was I actually wish I had talked to him a little bit more about that because I mean. He says that the scientists have been looking into that and trying to figure out. I'm like, yeah, but when you're making these barrel staves, you're probably using 200 different trees. I mean, has anybody gone, I'm doing a single tree barrel from this part of
Buffalo
the forest?
Trace.
Buffalo Trace does.
They did the single barrel project. So I have 2 of those barrels, which we could get into.
I do remember seeing that. We didn't taste it, but I did see that on the tour.
So they have, pardon me if I'm wrong, just because it's been so long since I delved into those. I do have 2 of the bottles, but maybe I'll get a couple more and let's do a podcast on that, breaking down. But basically, you buy the bottle. So let's say it's bottle 100. You go online, you register it, you put in your review, and then you can see where the wood was tempered, what type of wood, where it was cut on the tree trunk itself, all the way down to different mash bills, different lengths, different warehouses. And they did this basically as a database to pinpoint what was overall generally the best whiskey. So it's really the only huge experiment that I know of where people really delved into
and it makes sense.
Specifics. Yeah. It's you know, selling it to the public, letting them decide, and then collecting all this data is absolutely brilliant on Buffalo Trace's part.
I mean, we've already established that, you know, different areas in the rick house make it, so it's gotta make sense that a different part of the tree is gonna add a different flavor into it. Yeah, man, makes sense.
Speaking of flavor, I'm gonna throw some odd ones at you. How was the Ben & Jerry's Scotchy Scotch ice cream?
Nothing wrong with that one. Nothing wrong with that. It was that was fun. I've actually got a bottle of Ron Jeremy's Great Odin's Raven whiskey up there that, again, I think may have been an exclusive because I don't know anybody in the U.S. that...
The Ron Burgundy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, did I say Ron Jeremy?
You know what? Listen, like after the kids...
Doesn't he do a tequila or something?
He does a rum, and it's Ron to Jeremy.
That's the one I was thinking.
And it's actually pretty good.
Is it really?
I mean, you know.
But yeah, the Scotch, the Great Odin's Raven. Yeah, they're
what whiskey, or I'm guessing Scotch, would you pour over that ice cream?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably
something with some PX, maybe.
I go more on a caramel note. Okay. I might even do maybe that the Balvenie, the Caribbean cask.
Oh yeah,
that
one of my all-time. We're definitely gonna have a podcast on Balvenie expressions, but Caribbean cask, one of my favorite.
Well, that's. I mean, I think I've shared the story with you on the Caribbean cask that I got to hear straight from David Stewart. So they had initially had, I don't know what it was, 30,000 cases or something like that.
Yeah.
Cuban cask rum. Sent that, or Cuban cask rum finish, sent that straight to the U.S. market. Customs took one look at it, sent it straight back to Scotland, and they were sitting in the office like, what are we going to do with these 30,000 cases? This little intern kid goes, well, Cuba's in the Caribbean, right? And they're like, yep. Let's just change the label.
Change the label.
Change the label, send it straight back. And I was like,
I love it.
Really? This is the toughest security in the world?
I love it, man. It's kind of backtracking a little bit, but I have to ask, why the obsession with Jameson, and where did it start?
Probably with just my good buddy. He was Rory Sheridan. He was my J Business ambassador, working directly for the distillery. And what they do for these kids is they get them almost straight out of school, straight out of college, and then they take them into the distillery, teach them absolutely their everything is to know, and then they send them out to a market for like a year at a time. So you have no idea. You might be going to Las Vegas. You might be going to Mumbai. Like, you have no idea where you're going to go. And he got sent to Vancouver in British Columbia. And so he was doing Whistler and all the resorts in downtown, and we got to be good buddies. And he introduced me really into, the world of Irish whiskey, and hanging out with a bunch of Irish guys on your days off at the pub and everything like that was good. And, I went to Ireland for his wedding a few years ago and got to go to all these beautiful distilleries that are out there and tasting the kind of stuff. And I still remember the first time I purchased a bottle of Middleton. I went to the store and I bought it, and I think it was like $180-190 in Canada or something like that. And I get on the phone, I'm like, fuck, asshole. Like, this is the label's crooked. He's like, that's how you know it was handmade. And he goes, and probably on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny you say that. That's a little bit of a nod to Las Vegas Distillery. George, they have, pretty messed up labels sometimes. Artisan. Yeah. Just say it's artisan or hand. Yeah. So that's awesome. So a couple years ago, you did the Irish Whiskey Academy there too, yeah?
I did a more in-depth tour. The Irish Whiskey Academy is for a few days. I would love to do that. It is a bit pricey, so maybe
a couple grand, right?
For the most. Start a Kickstarter. Let's see if we can get over there.
Yeah. All right. Let's do that.
But just going to see the history and everything. I mean, I landed in Dublin. It's about a 3-hour, I think, drive down to Cork, other side of the road. Lost my luggage.
Cork looks amazing, by the way.
Cork was fantastic. Like the craft beer scene and food is way bigger than Dublin. It's amazing. But yeah, lost my luggage, soaking wet, had absolutely nothing. My charger was in my bag, so I had no phone, no taking pictures of anything. So my flight was delayed, so I showed up 3 or 4 hours late, thinking I missed my entire tour and everything like that. And she's like, Shane, we knew you were coming. She presents me with a bottle of Distillery 12 with my name engraved on it, gets me a dry hoodie, finds this little Jameson charger for my phone. I was like, this is awesome.
That's awesome, man. How's that Teeling 21?
The Kilbeggan 21. I had at Palace Bar in Dublin.
Okay.
That was probably the most mind-blowing Irish whiskey I've ever had in my life. But certainly on that. Well, no. I was with the master distiller at the Kilbeggan Distillery, and one-on-one tour, again, organized by John Cashman. Couldn't thank the guy enough. And this is, they're 20 minutes away from Tullamore. So the Tullamore the whole story with them being revitalized, and that's the whole thing with the Phoenix because the city burnt down and everything. Brand new state-of-the-art distillery. And then you drive 20 minutes north, and then they're running on a steam engine.
Yeah, that's
at the Kilbeggan with just dirt and cobwebs everywhere, and these old Oregon pine washbacks.
See, like the juxtaposition of
I mean, we rolled in, and this is probably my third stop of the day. So we rolled in, or I rolled in, and we go into one of the rick houses. And he's like, I don't recognize that barrel, and I'm thinking, how does he know? So many barrels, and he gets the forklift, takes it down, and he's like, oh, look at this, it's a 23-year-old. Pops open the bunghole, gets out the whiskey thief. He's like, what do you think? It's like, I don't think you distilled this here because it was peated. He's like, very good, this is Connemara. He goes, what do you think? I said, I think you're going to start losing the peat very soon as well. He goes, I agree with you, why don't we start bottling this up? And I'm just like, who gets to do this?
Bottle it up. That's awesome, man. You charge him a consultant fee.
I wish they had Uber. I wish I did not drive that day.
Yeah,
it's already bad enough. It's on the other side of the road for me, but
yeah. Any tips for people wanting to go to Ireland? Maybe just travel in general, where to stay, what distilleries to hit?
There's so much that has happened. I mean, like I said, there was all these new distilleries were under construction while I was there a few years ago, but now that they've all had stuff aging for 3 years, they're now officially, allowed to have Irish whiskey. What Teeling's kind of got into when they were reopening was they were using other people's juice and lending out juice of their own to get other distilleries. There's one out there, Dingle, that I'd really like to check out that I haven't had before. Teeling's has a brand new distillery and tourism center right in Dublin that I haven't hit. It just ask. I mean, find out who your local brand ambassador is and ask. It's an email. The worst they can say is no, and nothing can happen. I mean, I remember I was going down to Australia for a wedding, and I happened to look. There was an All Blacks game going on in New Zealand, their first game against France since they won the World Cup, and it was called the Steinlager Series. So I was like, all right. I sent an email to my Steinlager rep in Vancouver. He's like, what do you think? He's like, I'll send an email. Couple tickets to the game, hosted there, all the beer you could drink. Like, my friends that live in New Zealand are like, I've never been to an All Blacks game in my life. Like, how did you get these tickets? Like, I sent an email.
I asked. Yeah, man.
Don't be afraid to ask.
I got you, man. That's it's definitely on the list. So, I mean, you've been to so many places, so many distillery tours: High West in Utah, Kentucky, bourbon distilleries, Ireland, no Japan. Right? No. It's on the list.
Regret.
But what are your favorite places, favorite distillery tours, ones that just stick out to you?
Definitely the hospitality that the crew showed down at Garrison Brothers in Texas. I mean, there's
Let's talk about that bottling.
I think there's 15 people.
And that whole, I mean,
for the entire distillery.
Yeah, I was just down there. It's Nye County, right?
Yeah, they have to work with a group of volunteers to get that bottling out and get the waxing done, and it's amazing, and they keep you lubricated over the day.
Yeah, no, I heard it starts to get a little messy, little more artisan as the day goes by, but extremely hospitable people. I mean, it's that southern, like, I felt right at home. I went there a little early, was waiting in the parking lot, and they're like, come on over, and they're unloading stuff out of the truck. And one of the most, I mean, not only is it an honest tour, which I respect because I've been on so many distillery tours where I just get fed this bullshit. And I get it. Like, to a certain degree, you need marketing, you need some, like, protective proprietary stuff. I get that. But I felt really comfortable with what they're telling me, shooting it straight. I mean, that's that Texas style, you know what I mean? And it comes through in the whiskey, comes through in the hospitality. But how did that bottling, how did you get started on that?
The bottling was great. It was just, I mean, when Charlie was here in Vegas, just giving us a tasting and doing that, and said, if anytime you want to come down to the distillery. And I kind of looked around the room at 30 other bartenders. Is like, did anybody else just hear what he said? Like, why isn't everybody jumping on this? So I sent an email the next day, and it's like, when can you come out? And I just came out there. So I stayed in Austin. So it was about an hour drive in the beautiful countryside. And it's, didn't even know where I was. And then all of a sudden you're passing the Deep Eddy vodka distillery. You're passing Jester King, who's getting, nationwide recognition for their sour beers and stuff like that. There was a couple other distilleries, breweries, wineries. Like, I had never had Texas wine before. So, I mean, it was great, but you're getting out there and you're sitting there and you've got all the different positions, from the pigtailing to the waxing to the labeling. And you look out the door.
Right around on did you take the trailer?
No, we were having too much fun.
Too much fun?
Yeah.
Well, the tour, they load you up in a trailer.
On that wagon.
Donis, the master distiller, right?
Yep.
Master distiller?
Yeah, he's the master distiller.
Yeah. So yeah, he was driving us around on this. It's so Texas. Yeah, it hurts. It's great. So awesome.
And they compete as well. I mean, Sammy, who's there, I don't know if she's the apprentice or she's finally
assistant
fulfilled,
distiller,
but
she's amazing.
And she's still got the record for the highest alcohol and the most sugar.
Oh yeah,
in one of her brews, and she still holds that over all the boys.
Why not? Of course.
And it's great. It's like, here we go. So I came in the next day the first day I was there by myself, so you're just kind of like, who's the odd guy out? Like, we didn't know him, and then everybody gets comfortable and talking as the whiskey starts flowing, or as they call it, quality control, and then it's like, Sammy's like, oh, we got a few minutes. Why don't we take you around and just get a coffee cup full of mash, just drinking this beer? And it's like, this is just, where else do you get to do this?
Yeah.
So, and then Rev, he's one of the distillers as well. His wife makes this big lunch buffet for you, like that. It doesn't get more hospitable than that.
Feels like home, man. Yeah, I was down there. I went to Austin. Took a road trip from Oregon to Austin, but so yeah, I took a little detour.
A few miles.
It was fun. Yeah. So I took a little detour one day and went there, and they were just absolutely amazing. But I was down there for I think I'm going to say it right, Balmorea. I thought it was Balmorea, but it's not. So I think it's Balmorea. It's a town.
Yeah.
So that's like, so it's their double oaked bourbon. So, and what I like about them too is they're not pumping out moonshine. They're not pumping out all these. They're bourbon.
Yeah.
And they're sticking to their guns,
And
which
you're not
is
going to find a cinnamon stick on the property.
and I dig it. I mean, you have to respect in a business of pumping out spirit to make money right away. You know, I get it. That, like, to open a bourbon distillery is insane.
Oh, yeah.
Like, to wait, you know.
And their stories. And they tell you all the mistakes they made.
Open book,
yeah,
man.
Absolutely.
They're not experts. They're making it how they make it, changing as they go, experimenting, but they're not letting go of their core vision. In kind of an industry where there's so much bullshit and so much marketing and so much this. Yes, and I'll preface this with, if you're going to look for Garrison Brothers bourbon, it's expensive. Listen, it's expensive.
There's reasons for
There's reasons for it, and it's not going to be for everyone.
Yeah.
But it's delicious juice. But I was down there for their double aged release, the Belmorea. So, but later on, I would love to do just a podcast on just Garrison Brothers. We pull out some expressions and kind of delve deep.
I got a few of the single barrels there, and the actual ones that I think they finally arrived here in Vegas at Total Wine, the Cowboy. So I would probably say that. Yeah, your man Shane here dipped 1 out of every 6 of those bottles on the shelf.
Nice. I love it, man. Dream job. Nice segue, but I'm just saying.
Dream job, basically, yeah, something I've been, trying to just do for forever. Get somebody to all these guys that got me super excited and to travel the world and talk the gospel and everything like that. Is I'd love to, go to a distillery or go to, something like that globally and then learn everything from, the distillery cat's name all the way up to the family and the history, and then have them to pay me to travel the world and get other people that were a little bit closed-minded like me initially and get them super excited about it. It's sharing. I mean, I like saying it's the same thing in beer. It's the same thing in wine. It's the same thing in whiskey. There's geeks and there's snobs. Right. And the snobs think they know everything and don't want to share with anybody, and the geeks want to share everything and just talk about it and have fun. And it's I hate snobs.
Yeah, it's luckily whiskey, there are those snobs, definitely. But there's the geeks, but it's a little more welcoming, man. I'm not saying wine isn't. Wine can be a blast, man. It's just it has a stigma of being uptight. Scotch also. But, those are breaking down those barriers, and whiskey's about having fun. Your bottles are open. That's what it's about, sharing. And the way I say, you're speaking of being an ambassador is same thing can be said for sales of whiskey or anything, is just it's a transfer of enthusiasm. That's what I love. That's why a main reason why I'm doing this podcast. Why do I love what's in the glass? Maybe you'll love it. Let's talk about it. Get to know the people that are enthusiastic and passionate about it. So, I mean, that's kind of, why I want people on this podcast like yourself. So, kind of in the same light, where do you want to, money is not an object. Where do you want to retire?
Probably back in Japan.
Yeah.
That was just incredible. It was just so different. I mean, you woke up every day and every day was an adventure. You never knew what was going to happen. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be able to work at the same bar that I was still at, closing at 5 a.m. and drinking copious amounts and everything like that. But, it was such an easy jumping point off to go anywhere. It's like you're in Vegas. It's like, all right, we got 2 days road trip. San Diego, Palm Springs, LA. Yep. It's like, you want to go to Bangkok for 2 days? You want to go to Seoul? You want to go to Singapore?
Yeah.
And every country is so different than the next.
Sure. Awesome.
So I wouldn't mind going back to Asia. And I mean, especially with what's going on out there with the new, $1 billion Kavalan distillery and the stuff coming out of Japan.
I can't wait to do a Kavalan episode. I'm going to try to pull in JR.
JR and Max. Yeah, I think Max Solano would be really good on that one.
Those two together, I think. First of all, I love the juice. There's some where they weren't my favorite.
It's hot,
but it's young.
It's hot. The funniest thing was out of that
climate too, man.
That Paul Picot tasting. Yeah, is there was 12. I nailed 3 of them. One of them was Taiwan.
Me too.
Right off the bat.
I was in the back of the room and I go Kavalan, and like I could see
because I was sitting next to
I think
Sarah
Max
Gage.
turned around. Yeah,
I was sitting next to Sarah Gage, and I turned to Sarah Gage. I said, "This is from Taiwan."
Yep.
She's like, "What?"
It's hot. It's distinct, man, but it's good. Like
roasted pineapple.
Yeah,
is what I get the most out
tropical
of Kavalan.
fruit.
Roasted pineapple.
I still remember my favorite whiskey was the Kavalan Fino Sherry Cask, the Soloist series.
Yeah, Might have one on the shelf
Yeah,
over there.
it's
hand numbered.
Comes in like the box.
Mine's the nice blue edition. The Solist.
Yeah, I had that on Anchor Distilling portfolio tasting probably 4 years ago or so, in the Hangover Suite at Caesar's Palace, which is totally cool, right? That's such a Vegas-y thing, right? But Anchor is one of my favorite portfolios too, but for spirits and whiskey. But it's still to this day, someone asks me my favorite whiskey, and I always just rattle off Cavallon Solo Series, just because the memory of it. It was one of those whiskeys for me where I'm like, oh shit, like this is. It could have been
brand new. They don't have hundreds of years experience. So brand new. So
not at all.
They're only going to get better.
And it was something too where there was no expectation before I had it.
Yeah.
So I think it was like, oh, I'll just try this liquid, and then I tasted it. I'm like, oh shit. It was one of the first moments I think in learning whiskey and learning to love it where there was no expectation. So I was truthful with what was in the glass. It told me the story. I didn't preconceive. It wasn't, hey, you got to see this movie. You got to see this movie.
Yeah.
And then you watch it, you're like, it's not fucking very good because the expectation was so high. It was flipping on a movie thinking, oh, yeah, let's give it a shot. And then it blows your mind.
That's why blind tasting is so important with anything,
Huge.
with beer, with wine, with whiskey, going in there without those notions. I mean, I was all of a sudden, the very day after there, I went out and got a bottle of Dewar's 12 for $25 because blind tasting was like, this is unbelievable.
Delicious. I wish I showed you my notes because I circled it. I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
There were some that stuck out where I'm like, and the Highland Park 18, like, of course it's going to be good, right? I've had it before. It's fantastic. He's right.
I don't know if they still have it, but when I first moved here, the Gold Lounge right outside the High Roller line at the Aria, or the High Roller area, they had the Highland Park 25 for $25 a pour, which when you do the math is less than cost. So I was like, thank God the beverage manager doesn't know math, and I would just go in there after work and have a couple drams.
I love it,
this
man.
Is unbelievable.
A cool trend that I see right now in whiskey, it's happening in a couple bars in Austin while I was there, is they're doing break even series. So they'll give you the whiskey at their cost. They're not making any. But of course, like while you're there, you're going to eat or get some, a cocktail.
Bartender's getting tipped on it.
I would love if more bars did break even series on these highly allocated bottles. Well, like, don't be stingy. I know you can make more, but like, get some respect for your place. Get that fan base. Get some loyalty by giving back where you can.
And those are fun to do in group sharing scenarios. I remember back in Vancouver, it was like I had never tried Louis Trey's before, and Louis Trey, their largest market is Vancouver. They sell more there than anywhere else in the world. And I mean, when you think of the high roller places, but when you think about all the Asian money there, it makes a lot of sense. But we just got together with a bunch of bartenders around town. Everybody threw in $100. Everybody got a pour because we were all selling it for $350, whatever. Sure. We all got a pour. We all had fun, and we raffled off the ball. Pick a number, who gets to keep the ball, and it's like perfect.
I love it, man.
I'll pay $100 to try it because I'd never had it before. So yeah, when you're breaking even, it's a lot. It's the same thing when people like I spent $100 on this bottle. I spent that. I said it's $6 for a pour. Like you just spent $14 on a Bud Light at a Golden Knights game that you'll never remember that Bud Light. I'll remember every time I pour a dram from this bottle.
Absolutely. That's one of my biggest goals too for the Las Vegas community, is trying to set up a better whiskey community so that we can all get together, and whether it be private barrel selections where we all go in. I mean, it's happening everywhere, but one of my dreams, one of my goals for this city is to kind of get a bunch of like-minded people together. So
that'll work.
If you're listening, you're in Vegas, go to all the channels where you can reach me, and let's get this thing started. But with that, let's get on to the one of the last pours you got for us. Go ahead.
We got a couple more, but this next one, this is the Springbank 15. So from Campbelltown. So this is again. I just love the romance behind this area. Richard Patterson has a great book out. Is it The Nose of Perfection or Age of Perfection, or I can't remember the title.
If it's not The Nose, it should be. It should have just been called The Nose, right?
It's on my shelf just over there anyway. And it goes into like his whole journey through whiskey, through everything, and then going back 50 years ago into this area. And there was over 30 distilleries. I mean, this little quiet little island was the hub of whiskey in all of Scotland, because for transportation reasons, it was easier to get the boats in there and get the stuff out than it was to, horse and cart all the way from the Highlands all the way to a waterway or something like that. And they're down to 3. There's 3 distilleries down there, and these are another thing. You were saying dream job. Well, if somebody gave me cash, I'd love to, get a bunch of money and bring back to life one of these old lost distilleries.
Sure.
And if it's not the same equipment, but get the history behind it and get the story down there. And, that's kind of where the fun of the magic happens, digging down there. It's amazing to see how much stuff is out there and how much happened from Prohibition. I remember the first time I walked into the Brooklyn Brewery in New York, for example. Right as you walk in, they've got all these old closed down pre-Prohibition bottles from breweries that aren't there anymore. And I was like, how cool is this? Why doesn't somebody bring this back? Like, find the family that owned it, offer them something and make it happen. So, this one's a nice, just big expression of probably, what they were drinking 100 years ago. And they do really good stuff out there. A little bit of peat. They're also the only distillery in Scotland that does 100%
of the process
of their own malting,
all the way to bottling. Yeah,
I know. Like Balvenie and a lot of them, they have their own malt houses and they do their own, but it's not 100%. So the way these guys do it, it's almost very Japanese. In that way. No,
it's awesome. Yeah, a little bit more on this expression. 46%. MSRP $60 to $75. A lot of sherry casks versus the Springbank 10, which uses more bourbon. Mm-hmm. So you're gonna get more sherry in this expression. Non-chill, obviously, no color added.
Oh yeah, you could see just at the bottom of that bottle.
It's perfect. That's what I look for.
Oh, absolutely.
It's killer. Let's cheers this one. Oh yeah.
I mean, this is
clean. That clean dry smoke.
Scotch.
Yeah.
If I open the dictionary and look for the word Scotch, it's got a little bit of peat, not over the top,
not going crazy.
But you know that where it's from. It's strong. It's got a little bit of a burn because it's overproof. You taste the malt in there. I get some deep toffee notes. And it just pairs really well. It doesn't not over kind of the Isla because I'm not getting any of that briny or iodine-y stuff like that.
No medicinal,
but
it's almost that clean smoke.
Again,
rather than this
would be one that I wouldn't start anybody with this.
No, of course not. But it's a balanced expression where you get some of that smokiness. You know what I mean? It's just rich. Like I love the richness of this.
There's romance in that bottle. And that's what I dig about it. There's
romance. It's a sexy whiskey.
There's history, and reading Richard's words in his book that he writes, and you're closing your eyes and trying to imagine all these places that are now, half crumbled and gone, and probably the copper was probably all stripped during World War II for munitions and stuff like that, which is kind of so sad. But yeah, it's definitely on my hit list of a place that I'd love to go visit and, just get a bunch of these old, cool black and white photos of all these places and, trying to think that,
absolutely,
it's kind of like Detroit.
We're
in a way
just going and let's renovate. Yeah, I mean they've had that slump.
Yeah, exactly.
But then all it takes is people to invest some money, have a dream, have a vision, and bring it back to life.
Yeah, it was just the number one industry, and it just got moved out to other places for cost effectiveness and everything like that. But it relates.
Yeah, and Springbank, they're doing so many things. Like they have their 10-year, 12 cask strength, 15, 18, 21 wine cask editions. They have so many.
The hazel burns. Yeah.
So they're going to be their blend, right?
Yeah.
So they're triple distilled, non-peated, and then they have long row, right, which is highly peated. Or heavily peated. I
haven't had an opportunity to try a lot of that.
But that's same distillery. Yeah. So same distillery, 3 very different distillates coming out, brands coming out. So really cool. I mean, it's a staple. Shout out to I don't know if he's going to listen, but Kenny. So this is out of Pacific Edge in Vegas, right?
Oh, right on. Okay.
Yeah, I think Kenny Dayton is in charge of all the Springbank stuff. So it's delicious, man. Thank you for I haven't
that old kind of Nordic kind of writing that they have on there.
Everything about it is awesome. When you go look at that's a distillery where I definitely want to go. Mm-hmm. Like it's so cool. I think it was a Springbank distillery where they're talking about, I forget which book I was reading, but they were talking about whether the malt is ready by scraping it on the wall and seeing if it's dried enough. If it leaves a white streak, then it's good.
Really?
If it doesn't, it's not ready. So I think they do that, on that might be an old trick, but I think that was one of the places where you scrape it on the plaster wall.
I mean, that's the kind of place that it's such a small town that if you go and sit in the local pub and grab a pint, you're going to see one of these guys that works at the mill. And that's the kind of guy that I'm going to buy a beer and just be like, I want to hear some stories, man.
Of course.
If he's walking in with the limp or that monkey shoulder, it's like, all right, I'm going to pony up to this guy and just pick your brain.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, man. So tell everyone kind of, I know this is a Whiskey Talkin Podcast, but tell everyone what's coming out with CraftHaus, just because I want to bring as much exposure to the Las Vegas beer scene too. So
yeah,
what's new?
We're killing it. We've just released the brand new, the Silver State. So it's our blonde ale, and by all intents and purposes, when people ask me to describe it, it's just BEER. It's your easy everyday drinking. It's in the value section, and it's a great beginner's beer. I think with some of these other mass-produced beers that are out there, kind of. They sell them as, drink ice cold and because if it gets warm, it's going to taste like garbage and it tastes like corn syrup. Whereas when this one gets up, you can still taste the craft and the cereal and the malt in it. So, it'll be, craft beer for lager drinkers. So we're super excited to get this out and really kind of get out in the state with that. And then we've still got, all the other expressions going on with our Tweaked series, with our IPA series, Comrade Day is just around the corner. If you haven't been down to Comrade Day, that's our collaboration with George over the Las Vegas Distillery. That's this Super Bowl Saturday. And it's going to be kind of fun this year because we'll now have 3 vintages now that we've been open for 3 years. So we'll have the 2015, 16, and 17 Comrade. So to really see how that beer signs up and everything like that, it'll be a lot of fun in the Amigo. And who doesn't want to be at a brewery with everybody drinking 10% beer all day long?
Absolutely, man. That's only going to end well.
Yeah, so we have fun with that. I mean, our retail presence is great. Our restaurant presence, thanks to the bartenders in Vegas really getting behind it, and the locals. And if you have a bar that wants to try, get in touch with me. And my philosophy and Dave and Wendy, our owner's philosophy is, we're a local business. We're there. If you pick us up, fantastic. We'd love to be in your bar. But if you just drink us on your day off, we're here for you guys.
Absolutely. So yeah, anyone coming into Vegas, man, I mean, I don't know if people listening, if you need another reason to come to Vegas, but while you're here, man, take a trip to Henderson,
to the Booze District.
Booze District. What is it? 20 minutes from the Strip? 15 minutes?
I believe.
If you're driving.
I believe that KJ has finally got his license for the tap room down at Grape Expectations.
Oh, really?
So they're going to have their tasting room open. I just met, I believe his name was David, who was one of the new bartenders or wine tenders that they hired to be in there for the tasting room. So, it's going to be fantastic. One-stop shopping. You can come hit us up, and you've got the Las Vegas Distillery, you got Bad Beat, you got Grape Expectations, you got Love Lady that's a 2-minute Uber around the corner. I mean, it's
more to Vegas than people think, man. And that's one of the exciting things about this podcast too, is to shed light on what we have locally. We do have a couple distilleries, Las Vegas Distillery being the more prominent one, the older one, one that's kind of near and dear to my heart too, with George there. So, and that's in the Booze District as well. So go down, drink some whiskey, get a couple craft beers. So yeah, man.
Absolutely. We got a little bonus that you were talking about hockey and me being Canadian in there, so I thought I'd throw this little one in there. So this is
oh, nice.
This is done by the great one. So Wayne Gretzky. I don't think I really need to explain who that is.
Right, yeah. I think you're good.
I think the great one was enough.
Just Google Wayne, and it's either Newton or Gretzky that's going to come up. So
this stadium might be Newton, but Wayne has been a huge wine fan, and Wayne has a couple vineyards over in Niagara Falls, which is just outside Toronto, just north of Buffalo. One of the great white grape growing regions of North America, and probably the best region for ice wine. And he's also got out in the Okanagan, which is northern BC, so just north of Yakima and Willamette in Washington State. And So he sees what's going on in the world. He's a very, very clever businessman, and he said, let's start doing some whiskey because the category is growing not only in the U.S. and Canada, all over the world and everything like that. So he's released his new whiskey, and this one is the duty-free exclusive. It's the 99 proof that he has. So this is finished. It's all Canadian grain, malted down, and this one's finished in his own Cabernet barrels. And I had a friend of mine bring this down, and wow.
Yeah, this is it's so fitting for you to end on a Canadian whiskey, and this is the hockey whiskey. So let's get into this. On the nose, it's definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah, you get a lot of that.
You
wine barrel.
smell the red. You
Absolutely.
smell that. I mean, it was really nice that the Japanese use the Bordeaux barrels, but yeah, that he's doing everything in house. I'm not sure who his distiller is, but
Wow.
the sweetness on this is money.
Not only sweet, but you definitely get those wine oak tannins. It's very tannic. Acidity's high,
And it's unlike any other Canadian whiskey I've had. I mean, there's some great stuff out in
that
the
finish
market
is
out
like
there.
cranberry.
A lot of fruit forward.
Yeah,
and
man,
it's a long finish, right?
Huge.
Yeah, and this is after we just had a pretty smoky one as well. So
Yeah, no, that's wow, that's really interesting. That was a curveball for me today that you kind of brought out, and I dig it. It's evolving too, like that. Yeah, that finishes.
and he could probably bring the price down. I mean, obviously being 99 proof, he sells it for $99 Canadian, which
Sure.
is I don't know, 65, 70 US, something like that.
But listen, when
it's a liter bottle, it's worth it.
Yeah, and also you got the name, you
Yep.
got the cast finishes.
You got
It's
the name, you got the uniqueness. It's very different. I mean, I like to see. It's kind of funny growing up in Canada. I was more so into my Irish and my Scotch, and it's kind of, I don't know, I think that happens a lot. People don't really pay attention to what's in their own backyard, and they seem to think that imported is better. And then once you really start getting out there, and then that was again one of those things when Crown Royal came out with that Northern Harvest. It was like, holy moly,
Yeah,
this
sure.
is unbelievable.
I can't wait to future episode do, pay respects and kind of look to the future of Canadian whiskey, dramatically changing.
Oh, yeah.
In the last 5 years even.
Yeah.
Jim Murray helped that along a little bit too. So
What I'm actually hoping for, this is now that we're just talking about regions that have gone down. I think in Newfoundland over there, it's they're struggling out there, but they would have very, very similar conditions to Islay. I know Mike Nicholson right now, who got me into whiskey.
they have that sea influence.
He's now helping out with a brand new distillery out on Vancouver Island. And
Okay.
Again, it's going to have a lot of that heavy sea influence, but I think out in Nova Scotia that could be Newfoundland, that could be
Sure.
kind of interesting to see what happens out there. So
That'll be fun, man.
I haven't been there for years. Maybe somebody has jumped on it, but yeah, I'm
Sure.
getting ideas.
Nice. Yeah, if there's anyone listening too, so come with some opportunities. Let's do some fun stuff. So once again, that was a treat. All these whiskeys were amazing. I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Come to Vegas. Come see Shane at CraftHaus Brewery. Talk to him about beer, but also about whiskey. He will talk your ear off in a good way.
I will.
And then drink you under the table. So
I try.
That's kind of how it goes. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Shane. So that's about it.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thank you all so much for joining us for the very first episode of the Whiskey Talkin Podcast. If you dig the show, please share it with your friends and family that might also enjoy it. Follow the show on Facebook, Whiskey Talkin Podcast, also on Instagram and Twitter under the name Whiskey Talkin PC. The website's whiskeytalk.in. Feel free to contact me with thoughts, show ideas, whiskey suggestions, or anything your whiskey heart desires. Thank you again, and remember,
If it got out of hand, it was the Whiskey Talkin'.